I was living the life. You know, when I tell people when I graduated, I grew up in the church. I grew up in Bethel AME Church in Georgetown, historic church in Georgetown. When I left high school, I didn't go to church for many years after that. And I was living the life from college to Maryland to New York to LA. I partied, dated, I drank. I just lived the life, what they would call the life, just having fun. And I got to a point where I had rededicated my life briefly, or I thought I rededicated my life back in '97 when I went home to Georgetown, and that I didn't have any guidance, so I kept slipping back into partying and women and drinking and stuff like that. When I came to LA after a couple of years, I was tired. I was just tired of it, and I just felt this nudge for the first time to rededicate my life. Do it for real. Get mentorship, get in the community, which I didn't have before. And once I rededicated my life in 2004, end of 2004, I never looked back. And so it took a series of events along with mentorship to convince me that I was called to ministry.
Well, now tell me about the book. Is this the first one you've written?
This is the first solo book I've written. I was a co-author on another book called Unleashed, but this is my first solo project. It came on the heels of producing the film Open Wounds a year and a half ago that we actually showed in Georgetown December 2019. We screened it in Georgetown December 2019 at Howard Auditorium. And on the heels of that, I started writing the book. And basically, the book tells the story of my grandfather's, and the movie, my grandfather's murder in 1953. I like to call it At the Hands of Racism. He was shot and killed. And my grandmother said there was a bullet hole found in the back of his head. Yet they said on his death certificate, it's written that it was accidental drowning. And so it upset me because my grandfather will forever be dishonored, and he's a Navy veteran. So he was willing to put his life on the line for this country. And his boss at the time, he had gotten into an altercation maybe days earlier, a week earlier. And his boss actually was the one who shot him. And there was no investigation, no justice served, and my grandmother had to live with it. And my dad was 2 years old at the time, and he found out at 9 years old how his father was killed. And the man was a neighbor; they lived near my dad and my grandmother. And so, in the book, the overarching theme in the book is intergenerational trauma from racial tragedies. He got in a boat with two guys, thinking it was okay for him to come back to work. He was meeting his boss, and my uncle, his son. What was told to him was that the guy, as he got out of the boat, the guys were wrestling with him, and there was a woman that apparently witnessed it, but never said anything. Guys were wrestling with him. My grandfather was, you take all those athletes, my father and his two brothers. People tell me that my grandfather was all three of them wrapped into one. Very strong, very athletic, and so he wrestled the guys away. And he was a great swimmer. So he was running, he went towards the water to dive into the river to get away, and that's when he got shot in the back of the head. And his body came floating up days later. The book ends beyond my grandfather's murder. It's not just about the murder. It actually goes into how do we deal with this issue of racism in our nation. And so it talks about racism. It talks about trauma in black bodies. It talks about the trauma that white bodies carry. It talks about how do we heal within the black community? How do we heal within the white community? How do we heal together? And then how do we move forward? I knew nothing about my grandfather until about 6 years ago. I never saw a picture of my grandfather until about 5 or 6 years ago. None of my siblings did. We didn't know what he looked like. Not a word was said. And I'm 47. Mm-hmm. And so my grandmother, before she passed away, she had a conversation with me about my grandfather. I asked her a question, and she answered, and we talked briefly, and that opened it up for me.
How can people get a copy of it?
Right now, it's on Amazon, it's on BarnesandNoble.com, and it's on FortressPress.com. We're working to get it. With COVID and everything, it's been difficult to do things in person, like book signings and stuff in bookstores. But right now, Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Fortress Press are where you can order it.